All right, this meeting is being live streamed. By staying in this meeting, you consent to being live streamed. Anyone with access to the live stream can watch or share with others. All right, good morning to Udaran Das, to Marie Ugarak in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Scarlett Blom. Good morning to Leela Shakti Devi Dasi and Ranga Devi Dasi. Good morning to Krishna Chaitanya Das, Seva Rupa, Madhusudana Das, Advaya Krishna Prabhu of Ireland, Jivana Didi, and Vrindavana Chandra in Odessa. Can you hear me clearly? The sound is okay? All right, good. All right, well, I'm going to give a little bit of an invocation. I don't normally do that because it cuts into our broadcast time, but because we're beginning a new cycle of talks, it's important to invoke the mercy. So, Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kalamayam Dadati Sva Padantikam. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances to him. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who is established within this material world, the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagra Jatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master and all the Vaishnavas. I offer my obeisances to Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Raghunath Das, and Raghunath Bhatta, Gopal Bhatta, and Jiva Goswami. Offer my obeisances to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda, along with Advaita Charya, Gadadhar, Srivas, and other associates. Offer my respectful obeisances to Srimati Radharani and Sri Krishna, along with their associates, Sri Lalita and Vishaka. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Oh dear Krishna, you are the friend of the distressed and the source of creation. You are the master of the gopis and the lover of Radharani. I offer my respectful obeisances to you. Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. And at the beginning of Mahabharata, and also at the end, as well as at the beginning of Bhagavatam and at the end, at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita Mahatmyam is read, the Gita Mahatmyam, and in all those different places, some benediction is given to whoever reads that book or whoever participates in the reading. So it's not my position to give any blessing to anyone, but as we're considering the message of Srila Sridhar Maharaj in his book, Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam, on behalf of the organizers of this talk and on behalf of the other devotees present, I think it's auspicious to offer blessings and benedictions to whoever participates in this kind of Harikatha. If there's anything useful, if there's anything that we can rescue from my humble approach to the material, then let there be blessings for all of you who are participating in this talk. So I was asked about a year ago to try to speak something about the Bhagavad Gita. Brajasundari, who organized this talk, she said they have a tradition in Israel that on Saturdays people get together and discuss the scriptures. And she wanted to know if I could help her with some kind of a project like that. And I said, sure, who else is involved? And they said, well, Madhusudana Maharaj and Devashish Prabhu of England. And I thought, well, that sounds like a worthy project. Let me see if I can help. Later on, Madhusudana Maharaj wasn't able to participate, but he sent his blessings. He told me I was doing a good job. So I continued that, and we did 18 chapters, finishing up in December. When we finished, I was asked to create a new project. And so I asked Madhusudana Maharaj, what should I talk about? And he said, well, you can talk about the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Bhagavatam, Krishna consciousness in daily life. And I thought about it for a while, and I thought it would be good to introduce and discuss this book. This is the English translation of Prapanna Jivanamritam. And I have sort of a history with that book. If you allow me, I can talk about that a little bit. So, I first discovered this book, the Prapanna Jivanamritam, in the winter of 1981. I first visited the ashram of His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, Param Gurudev for many, in the winter of 1981. And it's a long story. It's an interesting story that I like to tell, but I don't want you to take all your time. It's enough to say that I was going through a kind of a spiritual crisis. I had been initiated by His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, as we called him, in 1976. And I'd been with the movement for about 5 years. Srila Prabhupada, of course, passed away, and there were some problems with the succession and a lot of confusion. And I had Harinam initiation, but I needed higher guidance. So I went to India at the advice of Bhakti Sudhir Goswami, who at that time was promoting Srila Sridhar Maharaj and distributing tapes of his lectures in California. So I came to the ashram there, and at that time, staying at the ashram were some candidates for sannyas. There was Kashi Ram Das Brahmachari, who later became Bhakti Kishore Aranya Maharaj. And there was Vrajendra Kumar Das Brahmachari of Mexico, who later became Bhakti Kushum Ashram Maharaj. and Kanupriya Das, who later became Bhakti Kanangiri Maharaj, and another brahmachari named Venkata Das Brahmachari. So we were all staying in a rented house down the road from the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mud. If you walk south down the road about 100 meters from the mud, there was, I don't know if it's still there, there was this blue house with, it had 2 stories. And in the back of the house, you could hear these women working on looms, creating cotton. You could hear the machines. So we stayed upstairs, and through the open windows, you had the same view of the Ganges as Srila Sri Maharaj's veranda. And the sun would go down in the west over there, over the rice paddies and the Ganges. And we all would go see Srila Sri Maharaj in the morning, and he would talk about a wide range of subjects. Some of those conversations were recorded, but at that time, our recording methods were still a bit primitive and a little bit sporadic. And we didn't record every single conversation given by Maharaj. But people were interested in knowing about the guru, about the succession, about differences in the mission, a lot of different internal things. And apart from that, Venkata Bhatta, who was a bit of a Sanskritist, was interested in translating the Prapanna Jivanamritam. So he would bring his Bengali Sanskrit edition. I have one here. It has a hole in the back. But you can see it's a humble publication. It's not a big, thick book. And he would discuss the idea with Srila Sri Maharaj and ask some questions. And then in the evening, we'd go back up to the blue house on the 2nd floor. And Venkata Bhatta had an old steamer trunk, one of these old trunks, they don't make those anymore, made out of metal. And this ancient Smith Corona typewriter poised on top. And the ink on the ribbon of the typewriter was so worn out that every time you typed a key, instead of leaving a letter printed on the paper, it would perforate a little bit of a hole. And we were using this really cheap onion skin paper. But at the time I arrived, they had a bit of a manuscript going already. And so in the evening, we would sit around and look at the manuscript and go through it and try to make sense of Venkata Bhatta's translation. One of the problems that we had was this particular book. You can see it's in Bengali lipi. It's published in Bengali type. Then Srila Sri Maharaj composed this book mostly in Sanskrit, and it's a series of quotes from the Bhagavatam and other scriptures. But they're organized around aphorisms or small pithy ideas that Srila Sridhar Maharaj would give. And at that time, Venkatabhatti, he was only translating these Sanskrit shlokas. So it was argued by Akshayananda Maharaj, who was also there. He had been the temple president of Vrindavan. He was the leader of our little group. He pointed out that if you don't translate the Sanskrit aphorisms given by Srila Sridhar Maharaj, then you're leaving the book out of the book. So there were a lot of different problems with that translation. And then we would sort of go back and forth and wrangle over the meaning of a verb or a noun in Sanskrit until late at night. And Akshayananda Maharaj, he was a bit eccentric. Srila Prabhupada made him the temple president of Vrindavan because he was a force to be reckoned with. He didn't suffer fools easily, but he had his own point of view. He wanted to make Srila Sridhar Maharaj's English, which was already a little esoteric, more Shakespearean, more Chaucer, if you like. And we felt that, no, it was necessary to make his language easier to understand, not more difficult. And so at night, as the mosquitoes were ripping us apart, Akshayananda Maharaj would sit on the roof and play this weird Hindu musical instrument called a sarangi, which is a kind of violin that you could prop on your knee. He would scrape it with a weird-looking bow. It produced an eerie, heart-piercing sound that would scare away the monkeys in the mango tree. And as we were trying to sleep, we could hear Maharaj on the roof of the building humming a strange raga, scratching away a mystical drone in the Bengali night. And in the morning, we would then again visit Sridhar Maharaj, and they would try to read the translation to him. But Sridhar Maharaj was very particular about the meaning of his book. He was very particular about certain things. And he didn't allow us to just make a loose translation. There's a very good book on translation called Mouse or Rat by Umberto Eco. He's Italian. And he discusses a lot of the problems around trying to translate something. So the title of the book is Sri Sri Prapanna Jivanamritam. And I thought I would try to explain a little bit about the intent of the book before going through it. So Prapanna Jivanamritam, the word Prapanna means surrender. Jivana, that refers to the soul or souls. And Amritam, well, we know that's nectar. So originally Venkata, he said, well, let's make this the nectar of surrender. We already have a book called The Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And there's another book called The Nectar of Instruction, Upadeshamrita. So this is another Amrita. Why not make it the nectar of surrender? But Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he didn't love the title Nectar of Surrender. So he told us different concepts, and you can go back and maybe find tape recordings of him explaining this. But I remember he would say, well, the point of the book is this is nectar for the surrendered, or for the surrendered souls. This is nectar for them, which is one of his points. But another point is this: Amrita has a special meaning. In English, we don't have one word for eternal life. Whereas in Sanskrit, it's Amrita. But even then, that reflects the word immortal. So the word Amrita, it means deathless, immortal, eternal. But it's also nectar, ambrosia, tonic, medicine, liquor. So it's kind of a difficult word to translate. Now, Srila Sri Ramakrishna pointed out that when you say immortal in English or in Sanskrit, what you're doing is you're negating death. You're saying not death, amrita, not mrita, not death, amrita. So in English also, not mortal, immortal. You know, in Spanish, it's inmortalidad. So it's the same idea. What is mortal? What has to do with la muerte, la mort, death? It's not that. So Srila Sri Ramakrishna is not happy entirely with an ordinary definition of the word immortality, because he thinks that when ordinary people talk about immortality, they're thinking, okay, not death. And that tends towards impersonalism. It tends towards Mayavat. The idea is to become liberated from death. So if you achieve non-death, then that's fine. That's the goal. But as he will point out in the book, in the text, we want something more than simply non-death. Non-death sounds like non-existence. But we're interested in life. We're interested in existence, but real life. So then he came up with the idea of positive and progressive immortality. So this is a proactive immortality. It's not simply the lack of death, but there's something positive there. There's something progressive there. Why progressive? Because if you look at Srila Rupa Goswami's analysis of different rasas, from Shanta rasa to Dasya rasa, Sakya rasa, Vatsalya rasa, Madhurya rasa, you see a progression of the nature of immortality that's found in Vaikuntha or in Vrindavan. Srila Sanatana Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he shows a gradation between the idea of heaven in Brahmaloka or Shivaloka, Maharloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka. Merging into the infinite, but beyond that, Vaikuntha, and beyond Vaikuntha, Ayodhya, and above Ayodhya, then Dwarka, Mathura, Vrindavan. And even in Vrindavan, there's progression. So he liked the idea of positive and progressive immortality, but it's just not a great book title. So when I was asked the other day by Braja Sundari, well, what's the title of the book? And I said, well, we can call it Nectar of Surrender. But even then, it's a little bit superficial. Then another thing that's sort of a thread running through the definition of Amrita, apart from being positive and progressive immortality, it carries this idea of nectar. And the idea of nectar is found in the Mahabharata and in the Puranas when there's a battle between the gods and the demons. And when I visited Angkor Wat in Cambodia with Bhakti Bimal Avadut Maharaj, one of the striking things about Angkor Wat is this long bas-relief that's carved in stone on the interior gallery of Angkor. And on one side, it's probably as long as a football field. There's a carving of the battle between the gods and the demons, where they take Mount Mandara, which is covered with various plants, spices, herbs, flowering trees, and they use that as a churning rod. And 108 gods and 109 demons grab this large serpent, Vasuki, and steady Mount Mandara on the back of a Vishnu avatar, Kurma, to study the axis of the churning rod, while Vishnu himself sits atop the mountain, studying it from above. And in this way, they have a tug of war and churn Mount Mandara in the ocean of milk until nectar is produced. And the idea of this Amrita is that the drink produces immortality. So the idea of Amrita, it means something like nectar, but also something will give you immortality. So you could translate that as deathless ambrosia. And so Venkatabhatta came up with the idea of ambrosia in the lives of surrendered souls. And that was the first translation. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj, his intention in the book is to describe how surrender and divine love is both process and goal. And this is an interesting point too. I had a long discussion with Tyagi Maharaj at the Bhakti Kamal Tyagi Maharaj at the Veda Life in Ukraine a few years back. We were on an island in the Dnieper. We had these little bungalows. So I visited him in his bungalow. We were discussing Prapanna Jivanamritam. And he was trying to explain to me that what the process of surrender is it's a technique. And the idea is, just like so many techniques, you practice this technique and you get a result. And I thought, well, this is a very sort of Western approach, isn't it? Many people who practice yoga expect that by practicing yoga, they'll lose weight or have a firmer body or more flexibility. And the idea is you have a certain goal and you practice this technique to get the goal. And so bhakti should be like that. It's a form of yoga. You practice the technique and you get the goal. And I said, no, I don't think you're really grasping the inner meaning here. Surrender is not a technique. It is the goal. He didn't like that. We had a bit of an argument on that point. But devotees like to argue. So now, how is it possible that surrender can be both the means and the goal? It's an interesting point, something to be considered. Now, normally the word surrender, it has a negative connotation. You think, well, if I surrender, that means I'm giving up my guns, I'm giving up my weapons, I'm giving up my power, and I'm going to allow the enemy to come and dominate me. And this is a very negative idea. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj pointed out again and again to us, he said, It's important to increase your negative tendency. And we couldn't understand it because normally we hear a lot about the power of positive thinking and you have to be positive. But Sridhar Maharaj insisted we have to increase our negative tendency, and that increasing our negative tendency leads to positive immortality. So how is that possible? How is it possible that these two apparently negative concepts of surrender or increasing our negative tendency and amrita or deathlessness, how has this become positive? Well, it becomes positive in a sort of a Hegelian synthesis. And Hegel points out that every idea has sort of a counter idea. So every thesis has its synthesis. And as thesis and synthesis are counterpoised, they harmonize in a kind of synthesis. So the idea of surrender is found in what's called the slave-master analogy of this German philosopher, George Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel. It's very difficult to read, but the idea is kind of simple. There's the master and there's the slave. The master apparently dominates and the slave apparently is submissive. But in the course of time, their relationship changes. The master becomes dependent on the slave, and the slave really controls the life of the master. My great-great-grandfather, David Christie, he was in India for the British Raj. And my great-great-grandmother said that when he returned to England, he was helpless. He couldn't do anything because when he was in India, his servants did everything for him. So when he returned, he was completely helpless because he'd become so dependent on the servants that the servants controlled his life effectively. So the slave becomes the master. And Gopi Bhartu Parakamalayar Das Das Anu Das. We understand that Krishna becomes so, God, the absolute, he becomes so beholden to his servants that, practically speaking, he wants to serve the servants. In fact, he wants to see what is it like to be a servant of the servant. And so he comes to this world as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we'll celebrate his arrival for Gaur Purnim. So, I don't mean to bore anyone. I'm doing my best to try to unravel very simply the meaning, but it's an important point. It's not that there's a process that we practice, and through this process, we achieve a result. At the same time, this word surrender, we have to keep coming back to it and trying to define this because it's hard to get, really. And it's a source of a lot of sort of theological discussion. There was an acharya who came out of South India after the time of Ramanuj in around the 11th or 12th century. And his name was Deshikacharya. And he wrote some books on surrender that are quoted by Srila Sridhar Maharaj in this book. And he had a particular point of view. And then in the northern part of that country, there were others who had a different point of view. And Deshikacharya's point of view is called the logic of the monkey, or Markata Nyaya, which means the surrender of the monkey, the logic of the monkey. And those in the north had this idea of the surrender of the cat. So just as I had a bit of a theological discussion with Tyagi Maharaj, this discussion goes back to around the 11th century, where the followers of the cat idea clashed with the followers of the monkey idea. And the philosophy of the cat is like this. If you're a kitten and you need to move from here to there, you wait until your mother comes and grabs you by the neck and drags you into the next room. That's the surrender of the kitten. The mother kitten grabs the baby kitten in her teeth and moves her to another place. I don't know if you've ever seen cats and kittens, but they do that. You could probably find a video on the internet. The monkey is different. When a mother monkey wants to move through the trees, and I've seen this in Navadweep, and I saw this in Costa Rica, the baby monkey holds on to the mother monkey with all its force, and in this way moves through the jungle. So the idea is, in one version of absolute surrender, we depend absolutely on God. And whatever his will is, that will move us from one place to the next. And the other point, that's the logic of the cat. The other point of view is the logic of the monkey, which says we're going to do everything possible to try to hold on to the absolute. And that was really personified more by Deshikacharya. What's the practical application? In the practical application, the philosophy of the monkey, it means that you do everything that you can do to produce bhakti. So, according to the different 6 principles of surrender, anukulyasya, sankalpa, pratikulya, vivarjanam, rakshashyati, vishvasya, gopkate, baranam, tata, like that. Accept everything favorable for devotional service, reject everything unfavorable, depend on Krishna's mercy, expect Krishna's mercy, be humble, like that. The idea is, okay, you're going to follow the system and do the technique and follow the rules as strictly as possible. Wear your tilak, go to the temple, go to Mangal Arti, offer flowers, offer prasadam, follow Ekadashi, worship the holy days, all of that. This is more in the line of Deshikacharya, where he says, hold on for dear life, just like that monkey is holding on to the mother. You need to hold on. Someone asked Srila Prabhupada once, how am I going to go to back to Godhead? It seems impossible for me. And Prabhupada said, hold on to my dhoti. So this idea of holding on to the lotus feet of your Gurudev and he will take you up. This is more in the line of Deshikacharya, the logic of the monkey. But there's another strong current, which is wait for Krishna's mercy and try to develop a kind of a flow state where God moves through you. I left one out. I only gave, here it is. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulya vivarjanam rakshashyati vishvaso gopkatre baranam tata atmanikshepa karpanye shadvida sharanagati. Accept everything favorable, reject everything unfavorable. Well, see, that's kind of the same thing. If you're doing everything favorable, you're also rejecting everything unfavorable, aren't you? Or is it possible to do everything favorable? May not be. Perhaps you cannot do everything. Somebody told me the other day, they were reading in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. There's 64 processes of devotional service. And another devotee said, 64? There's 64? That's too many. I can't possibly do all that. But we know Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. At least you can hear. You can do kirtan. You can try to remember. Even if you can't remember Krishna, how can you remember Krishna? I never met Krishna. How can I remember someone I never really met? But you can remember his devotees. And that's very auspicious. If you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's passages there that, or also the Chaitanya Bhagavat, it will say, whoever remembers Shamananda, whoever remembers Kaviraj Goswami, whoever remembers so-and-so devotee, he will get all this benediction and all this benefit. So I think if I can remember Advai Prabhu or Jivanadidi, or if I can remember Nalina Sundari, or if I can remember Vrindavan Chandra fighting for the mission in Ukraine, or Krishna Nandini, Vishwanath Prabhu, if I remember any of these people, if I can remember Bhakti Sudhir Goswami or Ramai Prabhu or Yudamanyu Prabhu, my old friends from the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Math, Vishvarupa, Govinda Maharaj, Srila Sridhar Maharaj. If I can remember Srila Prabhupada. I saw today on Facebook, I knew there was a Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg in Vrindavan, but I never saw traffic and cars and people walking up and down on Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg. And I thought, what a wonderful thing. Srila Prabhupada has done more, Bhaktivedanta Swami has done more for Vrindavan than any other person you could possibly imagine. And there he is, he's got his name on the main street. In my wildest dreams, that would never happen. But just remembering these people. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. It's not necessary to do all 64 processes of devotion or all 9 processes. If you can perfect one, Parikshit Maharaj perfected himself through Shravanam, Shukadev Goswami by Kirtanam. If you can perfect one, you're fine. So yes, accept everything favorable, reject everything unfavorable. Try to do all 6. If you can, then you're following more in the line of Deshikacharya and his idea. Hold on as tight as you possibly can. We asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj, well then, which is the correct marg? Is it the logic of the monkey or the logic of the cat? And he said, well, we like more Deshikacharya, logic of the monkey. So you'll see more monkey logic in the mat. In those days, when I was at the mat, there were a lot of monkeys in the trees because they liked the mango trees. So I would get together with Kashiram Das Brahmachari, who later became Aranya Maharaj. And with bamboo, we would make little bows and arrows and try to shoot the monkeys to discourage them because they would eat the mangoes used for making mango chutney for the deities. And we had the permission of Govinda Maharaj. So one day we went out and we're trying to shoot the monkeys and we hit a big monkey in the chest. He got up, jumped down from the wall and started chasing us. And then news of this came to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and he said, don't bother the monkeys. He said, their leader is Hanuman. And he's an eternal associate of Sri Ramachandra, so don't. But anyways, I'm getting away from my talk. So the point of this talk is to sort of try to introduce this book. Now, it's not a difficult book, really. It looks difficult because of all the Sanskrit, but it's actually very concentrated. And this is sort of medicine for the surrendered soul. Why? Because oftentimes you're trying to follow the logic of the monkey, Deshikacharya. You're trying to follow the 6 processes of surrender, all the rules. And sometimes we become discouraged and we think, I can't do this. It's too much. Why am I doing this? Nobody else is doing this, and everyone else criticizes me. So why should I even try? Well, this book gives you hope and motivation to go on. And I think I'll try to get into the substance of the book in our next talk, because I don't want to go on too long. We'll bore the devotees. I don't want to bore the devotees. But in this book, Srila Sri Ramakrishna takes the 6 processes of surrender, which I just read, and I don't know if I can repeat it. But accepting what's favorable, rejecting what's unfavorable, like that. He takes the 6 processes and then he dedicates a chapter to each one of those. So one of the chapters will be, why try to accept everything favorable? What's the benefit for that? Why would you do that? Who has done that? Has anybody successfully done that in the past? They have. Who are they? What did they say? So he's got the Shastra Vachanamritam. That what are the nectarine words from the Shastra, or the immortal words of the Shastra? Then the Bhakta Vachanamritam. What do the Bhaktas say? You know, some of them are frustrated. I tried and I tried. I can't do it. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, he says, I don't have a drop of love for Krishna. I've tried and tried. I have nothing. And therefore, also, we're told one of the basic tenets of our religion, our sect, our cult, is Trinata Pisu Nichena, Terora Pisu Hishnuna. Sure, you're a great devotee. You're advanced. You're more advanced than I am. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, don't be proud. Don't be proud. Look at the tree. Look at everything the tree tolerates. Be like the tree. Look at the grass. The grass is flexible. There's a story about the oak and the grass. And the oak tells the grass, look at me, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm powerful. And the hurricane comes. And the tree can't bend over because it's not flexible. And it begins to break. And then the grass tells the tree, yes, you're strong, you're powerful, but you forgot to be flexible. The grass is flexible. The grass is so humble. But when the hurricane comes, the grass bends over. So Mahaprabhu says, be like the tree, be tolerant, but don't be inflexible. Be flexible like the grass. That kind of humility. Learn from others. Don't think, I had the best guru in history. I can't learn anything from anybody ever. My guru was bigger. My guru is bigger than your guru. My guru is better than your guru. No, we have to learn from everyone. Try to learn from everyone. So these are the kinds of things we'll find in this book. Sri Damar says, well, first, he opens the book with benedictions. He wants to bless everyone. And he wants to get blessings also. And the second chapter, it's about what does the scripture say? The third chapter, what do the devotees say? And then there's a chapter each for accepting what's favorable, rejecting what's unfavorable, to be confident that Krishna will grant his protection. And that's kind of the cat mode of surrender. That means you're willing to jump out of an airplane without a parachute because you know there's a devotee down there with a parachute and he's going to catch you. You're waiting for Mama Cat to pick you up and take you away. You put yourself in a situation of great peril. Like recently, I was in Milano. The airplane practically crashed, and then they said, "Oh, don't worry, you're going to be fine, but we're going to take you to Bologna, which is a long way away." And finally, we had to take a bus from Bologna 2 hours to get back to Milano, and they dropped us off at the train station in Milano, where they have muggers, buggers, and thieves, and gang members riding around on bicycles with knives and pistols, and I have a heavy suitcase. But I'm confident. I know I'm good. Krishna's going to protect me. So I tried to call the devotees on my phone, and there was no internet. But fine, somehow I met somebody, and there was a phone call made, and Advaya Krishna Prabhu appeared out of nowhere and found me with my wife at 4:30 in the morning in the heart of downtown Milano, where everything is closed, and the only thing roaming the streets are cats. So that's more like the philosophy of the cat, waiting for the mama cat to pick you up. Like that. So depend on Krishna's mercy. Sometimes you can throw yourself into the infinite. It's like walking a tightrope wire without a net. And you know, Krishna's going to take care of me here. And that's terrible advice to give people because they might take risks. But the point is, you can take risks for Krishna. Then embrace his guardianship. See that? Embrace, that's like the philosophy of the monkey. Hold on. Don't expect that Krishna's going to do everything for you. Hold on. Be prepared. Get organized to offer yourself to him. And these are all different ideas about what we call surrender. You might try a different word if you're translating this. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he liked Sharanagati. Sharanagati is synonym, means the same thing as Prapanna. But the word Sharana, it means refuge, shelter, and Gati is the path. So what is the path of refuge? How to take shelter of God? That's the challenge that's being posed by this book. And that's the question that we'll try to explore later. And I hope I didn't take too much of your time. It's been about an hour. I'm told by Braja Sundari that there are questions. So I will stand by for questions.
Yes, dear devotees and friends, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box or raise your hand. But now I want to ask a question, Prabhu, because I said to you that I have it. It is connected, yes, with the difficulties of translation, because, for example, in Russian tradition of translation of Vaishnavic texts, the meaning of the words devotion and surrender is given in one and the same word, predanya or samapredanya. But in English language, these two words are different. And so when we are speaking about the nectar of surrender, what is the difference between the nectar of surrender and the nectar of devotion? Thank you.
As if I know, but people who translate the Bible have this problem with the word love. Because if you say love, normally you might be talking about erotic love, which is a form of love, but sex may be about exploitation. So how is that love? Women will complain, I was assaulted, this man had sex with me. Was that love? No, it was exploitation. So love and exploitation are not the same thing. How do you distinguish? Then there's sort of brotherly love, which is sort of altruistic. I think that's called agape, but I can't remember the Greek. But the Christians, they try to distinguish. Well, there's love when you help your fellow man. There's erotic love, and then there's divine love. So it may be a question, in terms of translation, it may be a question of the kind of adjective that you use to modify pradanya. You could say there's this kind of, is it pradanya? Is that the word? The Russian word you gave me.
Преданность. Преданность.
Yeah. Преданность. Преданность. Yeah. So maybe it's a question of providing an adjective for that. The German language is especially good at creating philosophical words. So you could think of surrender in terms of giving yourself to God, taking refuge of God. But see, those are two slightly different ideas. To take refuge, like the residents of Vrindavan taking refuge under the umbrella of Govardhan Hill. That's a form of surrender. But Krishna's friend Arjuna fighting on the battle of Kurukshetra, that would be giving yourself. Or also the gopis is an example of giving yourself entirely to Krishna. So taking refuge and giving yourself are both ideas about surrender. But it may be better to say prapanna or sharanagati. In translating today, I think it's fine to use the word karma when you mean karma, or dharma when you mean dharma. People know what dharma is. They know what karma is. You don't always have to say fruitive activities characterized by work instead of karma. Or the problem of action and reaction generated by fruitive activities characterized as work. Maybe it's better just to say karma. So in the same way, I think it's useful to define terms early on in the discussion of Prapanna Jivanamritam, so we know what we're talking about. So, for example, in South India, Prapanna had this twofold idea, the logic of the cat and the logic of the monkey. if a child does absolutely everything that mommy wants, that's what? The philosophy of the cat or the monkey, right? But if mommy is sick and the child has to make a phone call to the doctor, that's proactive. That's also surrender, but it's proactive. If you just simply wait, you wait for something to come from up to down, that's a form of surrender. But actively doing something, that's another form of surrender. Haridas Thakur is chanting 100,000 names of Krishna every day. He's not publishing any books, but Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Gopal Bhatta, Raghunath Das, they're editing books. They're producing something. Anytime you write something down, other people will say, no, that's not it. That's incorrect. It shouldn't be that. It should be this. You're taking a risk. But that kind of risk-taking is also prapanna. So taking refuge or sharanagati, this is one idea. The path of giving oneself. Another point that you can really focus in on is that surrender means getting rid of the ego. Like if you want a real pithy, concise explanation about surrender, it means giving up the ego. But as Srila Sridhar Maharaj will point out in his book, it's not the Buddhist idea. The Buddhist idea is dissolve the ego. And Buddha, he was great, He concentrated on the problem of suffering. So he wants to show you how you can become free from suffering. You dissolve the ego, no more suffering. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj doesn't like this. This is spiritual suicide. Dissolve the self. Of course, there's no more suffering. There's no self to suffer. And the Shankaracharya version of that is very similar, only we're substituting the infinite for zero. The infinite and zero are both very interesting ideas. Neither one of them really exist. They're imaginary. But which would you prefer, to be part of everything or to be part of nothing? That's why Buddhism left India, because everybody in India thought, no, I would prefer to be one with the infinite than one with nothing. It's a joke about the Dalai Lama. But he didn't get it. You can find it on the YouTube. A reporter comes to the Dalai Lama. He says, Dalai Lama, I know a joke about the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama says, joke. He says, so the Dalai Lama calls a pizza place. Oh, that's a joke. Calls a pizza place. Huh? And he says, the guy on the phone says, well, what do you want? What's your order? And the Dalai Lama says, make me one with everything. Make me one with everything. Make me one with everything. Of course, the Dalai Lama, when he hears the joke, he doesn't laugh. He doesn't get it. He's like, what's the joke? Because the Buddhist program is make me one with nothing. Make me one with nothing, which is paradoxical. How can you have a pizza with nothing? But where the program of Buddha is make me one with nothing, and the program of Shankara is make me one with everything. Our idea of getting rid of ego has to do with service. How can I serve God? How can I discover my real ego as a servant of God? So that's the point of the book. So see, this is not a difficult idea. How can I get rid of the ego? By serving the devotees. It's a very simple idea. But we don't like it. We don't want to get rid of the ego. So then we say, oh, Sridhar Maharaj is difficult. Let me study astrology. Sridhar Maharaj is difficult. I'll get a special jewel and put the jewel on my finger, and that will help me with the planets. But no, that's not what Sridhar Maharaj is saying. He's saying, give yourself, surrender yourself, take refuge. This is the idea, basically, of surrender. But we'll have to look at that more deeply in our next talk. I don't want to bore everyone. There's Indubala Devi Dasi in Italia. Здравствуйте. Oh, hi. There's somebody from Latvia there. Hello, hello. Ranga Didi in Germany. Well, we say Guten Morgen because it's Morgan in Mexico. Or maybe Guten Abend in Aleman. Stoka Krishna. Well, thank you all very much for listening and giving me a chance to talk about this. I think this little book has a lot of very interesting ideas in it, and they're not so difficult. The section that gets into depth on the different principles really follows Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamritam. And if you watch Madhusudan Maharaj's Back to Bhakti Basics on bhaktionline.ru, you'll find out more. So stay tuned. Happy Gaur Purnim, Jai Gauranga, Hare Krishna. And Leela Shakti, she's there. Jeevan Aditi, hi. Good to see you. And thank you all so much for checking in. You bring sunshine, rainbow, love, peace to my heart. Thank you. Good to see you, Adwai. Haribol. We'll talk soon.
Jai Mahayogi Prabhu ki jai.
Krishna.
Hare
Gaura
Krishna.
Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All right, I'm going to sign out then. Tapanandini, bye-bye. Good to see you.
Hare Krishna. Dandavats. Thank you, everybody, for participation. See you next week. Please accept our obeisances. Большое спасибо всем за участие. Примите поклоны. Увидимся на следующей неделе. Преданные Вилы Говинды, я вас очень рада видеть. Харе Кришна. Дандаваты.